Welcome to the Winners Win podcast, the podcast that highlights awesome people in Kansas City and their secrets to success. I'm your host, Jaime Simpson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of NetStandard right here in Kansas City. At NetStandard, we manage technology so that our clients can focus on growing their business. Today, my guest is MaryAnne Metheny. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Hope House. Hi, MaryAnne.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This is our first podcast experience together.
Yes, it is.
But you're getting ready to have your own podcast, I hear.
Yes, I want to venture in and see how that goes. So I'm hoping to learn some
well,
stuff today.
We're pretty professional, so that's going to go well for you. Let's start, MaryAnne, by telling everybody a little bit about what you do.
Well, I am the CEO at Hope House. So at Hope House, we work with victims of domestic violence, and our goal is to help them find their voice and find what it is that they want, and then help them to achieve that.
So you've been at Hope House for many moons. So did you tell me a little bit, and I don't know the answer to this. So we know each other because I'm on the Hope House board, and that's how we knew each other before that, but that's sort of how we've gotten to know each other better.
Right.
But how did you first get started working with Hope House? Were you in social work already? Was that your area of interest? How did you get to Hope House 30 years ago?
Well, I have a degree in social work. I have a master's degree in social work and had always done work with women and children and knew that I wanted to do that. And when I was going to school to get my bachelor's degree, I had did some volunteer work at the domestic violence shelter there. And when I moved to Kansas City, I wanted to try to get back into that. So I applied, and
here we
are 30 years later. Wow. So I started out as the therapist. It was the first therapist working with the women who were living in the shelter. So it was a very small program at that time, just really mostly provided just shelter. And it was an old rundown house with the ceiling caving in. It was a hot mess. So, and then we've just grown, and 30 years later, here we are.
So when you were a young MaryAnne growing up, did you picture yourself working with survivors of domestic violence? Did you picture yourself leading a nonprofit that does that?
Not at all.
What did you think you were going to do?
Well, I knew I would do social work. I mean, I really never veered from that.
Yeah.
That's what I got my bachelor's degree in, went back and got my master's. And so knowing it was something to do with women and children, I knew that I wanted to do that. I started out in foster care, working with kids who are in the foster care system, which kind of just leads into the situation that I was in. So a little known fact, I don't really talk about it much, is I started at Hope House when I was first married and to my first husband, and it didn't work out well. It was not a good relationship, and you learn that you can't live it and work it at the same time. So I left. And
I didn't know that.
No, I don't talk about that too much, but then I mean, that's really kind of what, when I knew that that's what I wanted to do, to go back, was about 2 years later, I was able to go back and start again.
I've heard you and some of the other staff say that, that you can't live it and work it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I didn't realize that you had an experience with that. So
yeah, mine was just very emotional. Yeah. Just extremely emotional, and it was difficult, but worked through that, and then I came back.
So how do you think that experience affects how you lead Hope House now? Do you think it makes you, does it change your perspective, do you think? Or do you lead more out of your experience in working with the families and sort of what they go through?
I think it's kind of back there. I know what it's like. I think what I really hope is that we're able to help people to reclaim who they are, because that gets lost when you're in a situation that's abusive. And I do know what that feels like, to get lost and not know who you are, not know your own voice. And that's really, I think, what guides me in the work. And it helps me to do that. I don't really think about it too much. The way you asked that question, it made me want to answer it that way. I have recovered from that, have a wonderful relationship now that I don't know that I could have had I not experienced that. Because you don't know I didn't know what I wanted and needed until I knew what I didn't want, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, and having been on the board for a couple of years and some of the trainings and the things that I've gotten to be a part of since I've done that, I think even I think it helps characterize, I think it broadens the definition of what domestic violence is for me. I think I had a narrow view of sort of what that looked like and who was impacted by that. And I think
Right.
the more I'm around it, you start to realize, one, there's a lot more people affected than I think we talk about.
Right.
And two, that there are different types of abuse that are far different than just sort of the physical black eye,
Right.
picture that we paint of what domestic violence can look like.
And I think that's very typical. What you have, I think the more that people are exposed to it and the more that they learn about it, it is such a complex issue. It isn't as simple as, you get hit, you leave. It's not. It's not that at all. Domestic violence is about power and control, and how that control and power is kept over the other individual is varied. It's wide and varied. Physical is what most people think, but it can be emotional and verbal, economic, sexual. I mean, there's lots of ways that you can maintain control over someone else without ever having raised a hand to them.
Do you feel like, when you started 30 years ago, do you feel like we had the same understanding culturally of what domestic violence was then as we do now? Or do you feel like, you know, as a world, we've changed in terms of how we picture that?
I think we've grown a lot. I think we have a long way to go. But when I first started, you didn't talk about it with anybody. Nobody, it was like this, it's shameful and the secret that nobody wanted to talk about. I think one of the things that really opened up the conversation for us at Hope House was when we were doing the first capital campaign to move from the old house on Truman Road that was falling down, that was just, oh my gosh, horrible, to our campus setting was the O.J. Simpson trial was on at
Mm.
that time. And so people really started to talk about domestic violence with us and saying, explain this to me. How does this happen? And it really opened the doors in ways that we it never had experienced before.
So one of the things that's different about Hope House now than it was 30 years ago, and actually it's the 40th anniversary this year of Hope
Correct.
House. So
Correct.
there were 10 pre-MaryAnne years,
Correct.
and then you've been
Yes.
there for the rest of it. But you do have I mean, 30 years is a long time. You've got a lot of experience with
Right.
all of the things that have
Right.
happened. But my first recollection of Hope House was as a shelter, like you said,
Right.
sheltering women and children who had gone through this experience. But we define what Hope House does differently now. So can you maybe share a little bit about what types of services Hope House does? Because I think it's really a lot different than what most people think.
It's very different than what most people think. I think when people hear Hope House, they think shelter.
Yeah.
And we are so much more than shelter. And we really realized early on that it's going to take more than just shelter for people to be able to overcome all of the obstacles that can be in the way to being free and being able to live your life free of abuse. So as we have grown over the last 40 years, it's really been based on our clients and what the clients are saying to us. And they're saying, this is what we need and how we can benefit from that. So we listened to that, and then we formed all of our programs have formed because we've listened to what our clients have said. So we know that if we can surround people with all of the services that we do, we can help them be able to navigate through all of the obstacles that get in their way. So again, power and control has been taken away from them. So safety of shelter is definitely needed, but it's not needed for everyone. Not everyone needs to come into shelter. Some people want therapy. So we offer therapy for both adults and children. group and individual. So again, it depends on what their need is. We go to court with people. We have one of the largest court advocacy programs in the state, where we are in 13 courts, and we help people navigate through that court system, which can be so intimidating and so difficult to do. We have contract attorneys that help with divorces and protection orders, those kinds of things. And then we have hospital advocacy. Well, we'll go out to the hospitals where people are coming in. We focus on Eastern Jackson County.
Right.
And we go out and we'll meet with people who are there, who have screened and said, yes, I want to talk to an advocate. And we can then work with them. We have a safe visitation center that came again from our outreach clients saying it's not safe. The court says I have to give the non-custodial parent visitation, and it's a very dangerous time to exchange children. So we do that now in a safe place where nobody gets hurt. So and our newest program that we're really excited about is we've expanded our housing. So we now have multiple housing programs that we can help people. We're actually helping people either not have to come into shelter or leave shelter earlier than what they would have been before, because we have resources that can help them get into their own homes. And then we're starting to expand our prevention program as well. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think, and it's not just women either, right? That come asking for help. There's men and women who are in abusive situations that are being helped with what we do at Hope House.
Right, and all of our services are open to men and women. We really try to be gender neutral in how we talk about it. But I will say that the majority of women, or the majority of victims that we see, are women. That tends to be who calls us the most. But we're serving about 5%, maybe 4 to 5% of our clients are males.
I would assume access to resources is part of that, right? You know, that because of control and because of things, that your access to family or money or, you know, resources affect who comes looking for help from Hope House.
Definitely. And what we see, the people who come to our emergency shelter, the demographics are very different from the people who are in our outreach program. So we do see that safety is not necessarily as common of an issue for male survivors as it is for the female survivors. But what we see is that the male survivors need help in court. They need help navigating through that process, and they also need the help through therapy and support. So we have a male support group. We have therapists that can work with males who are interested in that, and we're seeing that that's what our male survivors are really looking for, is that support, not necessarily the safety that shelter would provide.
Tell me a little bit more about the prevention programs. You said we're expanding. So what are we, you know, what do those look like, and how do people who may not be familiar with Hope House, you know, interface with that kind of a prevention program?
Well, we're really trying to think outside the box with our new program. So we have hired Tina, who's a former board member, who is coming in, and she's going to take our speakers bureau kind of to the next level, where we want to be out in the community talking and educating about domestic violence. And then we're also trying to look at ways where people would want to, opportunities where people could learn more. So having people come and having an art activity or a cooking activity, but at the same time we're talking about domestic violence and sharing resource information, sharing information that we think it would be helpful for them to have. But people don't just want to come and sit down and talk about domestic violence. It's ugly. It's, nobody wants it. I wouldn't want to do that either. It's not pretty. But if we could do it in a way where you're having an activity and you're having fun, but you're also learning at the same time. So that's one of the things that we're really looking forward to doing. We want to be out in the community and really impacting where people gather in groups, whether that be kids or adults. So any kind of church groups or sports groups, or just book clubs, those kinds of things, really being able to get out and really talk with people and let them know that we're here. I think it's important. Everybody knows someone that's been impacted by domestic violence. You may not know that, but you do, because it's too prevalent in our society to not know that. But if people are aware that we're here, that we have resources, then they're going to be available for those people that come to them when they're ready to talk about it. So to me, that's really important. And we also know we're never going to stop domestic violence until our community comes together and says domestic violence is not okay. And until we as a society come to that, we're still going to have it.
Well, and like you said, I think it's a resource that people don't plan to need. Like, I mean, you don't, no one starts a relationship expecting it to end in violence,
Right.
so you're not necessarily listening, or I might not go to a topic that they're talking about, domestic violence advocacy, that might not ring a bell. But when you need it, you need it,
Right.
and I think we were having a conversation the other day about CPR training and how, with what happened on the field in one of the football games a couple weeks ago. And I know you're not a big sports fan, but there was a guy, everybody knows
Right.
that Hamlin went into cardiac arrest, right?
Right.
And we were all talking about how easy it is for something like that to happen, and the number of the few people that actually have the capability to perform CPR if they would need to, because we just don't think about it. But it's not the kind of thing that helps me to learn retrospectively, right? I've got to kind of know it before it happens.
Right.
And I think, so I love the idea of having more people be aware of what types of, I think that's why it's really important to talk about all of the different things that Hope House does. It's not just shelter.
Right.
If I have a coworker that needs a safe custody exchange, which frankly is a huge problem for lots and lots of people.
Right.
The fact that there are resources out there that can help them do that, I think, are huge. And a lot of people just don't know what's available and where to go. So I think that's exciting.
I think the only way to do that is to continue to talk about it too. So opportunities like this, where we can reach a group that I might never have had the opportunity to reach, but through your connections and through your connection to us, we're now going to reach a group of people that we wouldn't have reached before, who can now know that there's help out there. They may not need it today, but at some point they might as well.
Well, and of course, it's one of those things you hope they never need, right?
Absolutely.
You hope you're talking about it and it's something you never need, but who knows, right? Now, you're a mom and I'm a mom, and we've got kids close to the same age, right? So how does what you do, how did it affect how you raised your daughter? Did it?
Absolutely. We
Who's a smart, extremely capable person, right?
Absolutely.
A grown adult with a real job and capable,
living her own
successful.
life.
Yes.
Doesn't need her mother anymore.
Absolutely not. Right.
But I really talking to her about making sure she always knew who she was and what she wanted, and not to let somebody be able to take control of that. We talked a lot about advocating for yourself. I think if she was listening, she'd be like, oh my gosh, I heard that every day. That you have to advocate for yourself. You have to keep your voice. Don't let anybody take your voice from you. And you have to be treated with respect, whether it be friends, relationships, coworkers, that you have to be treated with respect. You deserve that, and you need to treat people with respect as well. But it really was about her being able to claim who she is. And, she's just as has just as much opportunity to become a victim as anyone does. But if we can arm people with the information and we can really talk about that, then I think that helps them go further. So I do know she will come to me and or her father and I and ask if she needs help. She knows that we would be there, and that we are there to support her regardless. So I think if we can talk to both our sons and our daughters about that, it's just as important to have those kind of conversations with our sons and saying, it's not okay. You have to have your voice. They have to have their voice. Respect. It has to be about equality in the relationship. So that has to be talked about with everyone, not just with our daughters.
Oh, I think, I have 6 between my husband and I, but my 2 kids, I think particularly my son is actually the one that I talk more about it to than my daughter, because my daughter is sort of this weird superhuman thick skin kind of chick. And so in fact, I pity the poor fool who tries to do that. But like my son is actually the really sensitive one, and he's the one that, you know, he's also been around abusive relationships, and so he's really sensitive to himself and acting out in a way that he knows is not how he wants to treat somebody or what he, and he has, he goes to therapy and he's had different people he talks to, and he can pull himself out when he identifies, okay, this isn't a behavior that is okay, and or somebody's not treating me in a way that's okay. And I think so. I actually think I have more conversations about it with him than I do with my daughter. But I think it just depends on personality, and it doesn't, But yeah, I think it's important for everybody. And I think certainly on the board, I know we talk a lot about balancing the board too, from a not only a DEI perspective, but from a male to female ratio. We don't really want, it's not just one gender's issue or one group's issue. It's everybody's issue. So
That's right.
What are some of the, you obviously, in addition to caring deeply about the people that you care for, I mean, you obviously are captain of the ship in terms of running the organization too. So what have been some of the challenges for you as you try to direct the business side of what Hope House is doing? Because I'm sure you attract a lot of people that work at Hope House that are also passionate about the cause, right?
Right.
So how do you balance that?
I think one of the struggles, and I think I would imagine that many nonprofits feel this way, that we are a business. I mean, we have to pay our bills, we have to keep our lights on, and we have to run the organization, we have to have insurance, and we have to follow rules and all of those things that people don't necessarily think about. They're like, oh, you're doing God's work, and you're you're saving people. Okay, but we're still a business, and I still have to follow the rules, and I still have to have, attorneys who can help me with HR issues and those kinds of things. And it's still, so I think sometimes that that sense of I'm helping people can kind of get lost sometimes, or it gets buried when you're dealing with all of the technical and all of the things that go along with running a business, whether it's a nonprofit or not.
I'm sure that's true. And I'm sure among your, because obviously you're involved in the community and you're involved in business organizations like the chamber or whatever, and I'm sure it can get lost among your peers, your CEO peers, that you are essentially running a business as well. The clients are different, and I think a lot when I sit in board meetings and we talk about some of the things we talk about, I think, oh, well, this is exactly the same thing I just did last week. Or I'll get in a board meeting at work and go, oh, I just had that conversation yesterday at Hope House about such and such. And so there are so many similarities actually between, and our organizations are similarly sized. So I can kind of, when you're talking about insurance, I think, oh, well, I just did that, and here's what we did. And it actually relates because it's the clients and the services are obviously extremely different, but some of the business side of what you do and what I do are actually a lot the same. So I think that always strikes me, and I bet it's hard. I bet you can feel buried. You're kind of the adult on duty all of the time for, the bleeding hearts that are doing the good
That are out there on the front
Yeah,
lines.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's my responsibility, is to make sure that those that are on the front line have what they need to do, that we have to be there for them. We have to be able to help them and support them through the difficult things that they're hearing every single day. So it's then our responsibility to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
Because this is hard work. So
Was it hard for you to transition from being a direct care provider and then being sort of a manager or a leader of the organization? Was that a difficult transition?
well, I kind of did it slowly.
Yeah.
So I went from being the therapist to being the shelter director. So I was still very much in the mix of it all, and I was in shelter. My office was in shelter, and I was doing day-to-day things with the clients then, and then I slowly kind of moved out of that. So, but I think each time an opportunity came available, I was ready for that. I was ready to say, okay, I'm ready to do this now.
So it's a big year for Hope House. What exciting things do you have planned for your 40th? You started by beating the drum at the Chiefs game.
I did.
Very exciting.
What an opportunity.
And
I was
MaryAnne's such a huge sports fan, so it was a big deal, right?
It was. It really was. It was an opportunity never dreamed that I would ever have. And I really want to thank GEHA for giving me that opportunity and for selecting me for that honor. And so I was so excited to be able to do that.
And it was the day, right? It was
It was
the actual anniversary of
Right.
Hope House when you did it too,
Right.
which is really fun.
And I shared that with Gene from GEHA, and he didn't know how impactful that was for me to be able to be really celebrating Hope House on our anniversary. So it was very exciting. My biggest fear was I was not going to stay I was going to be offbeat, and that was like my biggest fear. But Melissa was there helping me.
Good.
She kept me in line, which was nice.
If the former football players can handle it, I feel, other than the fact that you are height challenged, I'm not sure what the right way to say that is, but the drum is actually really big.
It's
right?
huge.
It's
huge.
Weird.
Yes.
Kind of intimidating. It's great.
Not the fact that I was in front of 80,000 people. That wasn't the intimidating part.
Right? Obviously. But so that was the kickoff to the year, but and somewhat unplanned kickoff, but it worked out well, right?
It did.
What else do you all have planned for the 40th?
Well, we're really trying to do honoring where we've been. So we're going to do some little events. We're going to do something with our former board, which I'm really, really excited, and hope that we can have quite a few of our former board members come and celebrate with us. And then at our gala in August, we'll have really the theme will be the celebration of the last 40 years. So
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're leading charge.
I am. I'm the chair of that's why I was telling some of our peers that they'll have to be there this time because it's going to be super fun. And then my uncle is the co-chair, and he was the founding chairman of the board 40 years ago. So I'm excited to be able to do that with him.
Oh, I'm ecstatic that he's willing to do that and stay. I love visiting with him and talking with him, and he doesn't hold back. He tells me what he thinks and what he believes, and he's always had good advice. So
he's been really interested, about some of the things we've talked about today, about some of the changes in how we deliver services, and some of those things have been really interesting for him. And the thing that he told me, when we talked about the founding of Hope House, and I know you've heard the story 100 times, but he and Barbara really thought that this was like a short-term problem. That, hey, this, these women are sleeping in their cars with their children, and so we'll have the shelter, and then everybody's going to find out that domestic violence is a problem, and then everybody will just stop doing it, right? And so the 40 years, I think, is sort of bittersweet in the sense that I think they believed that we could be better as a community, and the need is still there. It's changed a little bit, but it's clearly still very much a part of what the community needs. So anyway, we'll be excited to do that. So the thing that I ask everybody at the end of the podcast is what word of wisdom or piece of advice would you give someone like Chloe, or somebody who's starting out in their adulthood about how to get to the point where they're as satisfied as you are with where you're at?
I think figure out who you are and what you want and go for that, and then surround yourself with people who will help you get there. I think one of the things that was said to me was when I first took over as CEO, said surround yourself with people smarter than you and who know how to do things you don't know how to do, and that will help you to get where you need to go. And I have kept that realizing I can't do it all. There's no way I can know everything that needs to be known about running an agency. I need people, I need accountants, and I need people around me. And that really, I think that goes true whether it be in business or in personal. You need to be around people who value you for who you are and who will support you in getting you where you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think if there's one thing, if I can give, and I've said this to my kids before, but if I could give them anything, it would be the ability to be confident about who they are and not worry so much about what everybody else thinks. But unfortunately, you can't just gift that to someone, but they have to kind of figure it out on their own. But if I could, that would be the one shortcut I would give them to figuring all of that out.
And celebrating your uniqueness. I remember having those conversations. It's like, but everybody's not doing that. It doesn't matter. You're unique. You're an individual. You're you. Celebrate that. Even if that means that you're standing out in a crowd. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right.
It gets easier, I think. I think when you're 16, it's hard to want to be the person that's
different.
And even my kids who are different because they want to be in the group that's different.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's still like different with a group instead of like necessarily who they really are. I mean, I think it takes them a while to sort of figure that out. But, well, thanks for being with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It was fun to chit chat and
Very
hear
excited.
more about your background. I appreciate it.
Thank you.